I became pregnant on the 3rd anniversary of our marriage. I was so filled with delight that I could not wait to share the good news with Julian. But shortly after I left hospital, a red coupe careened out of control and crashed into me. The next thing I remember, I was on a hospital bed. My baby was gone and the other side had scratches. Once I regained consciousness, Julian phoned, and over the next handful of days I will be on a business trip. Take good care of yourself. You were with me until he hung up. Then I heard him saying to the next word, "Don't cry, my dear. It is the other person's fault for not paying attention to the road. Didn't you always wanted to see the aurora? I will take you there." I didn't expose his lie. Physically and mentally, I just felt totally exhausted. I decided to get a divorce after I left the hospital. The day I was discharged, Julian called. "Oh, aren't you at home? Honey." I answered quietly, "I'm outside. I'll be back soon." His voice was energized, with a hint of something strange that he didn't even notice himself. "Then I will wait for you to return. I brought you a business trip gift." I hung up the phone and stared at the photo of Julian and me on the screen. An undeniable annoyance bubbled up in my chest. I changed the desktop wallpaper, hailed a car, and went home. Dinner was already made by Julian when I got home. I stared at him, busy as he was, unable to fathom the way he had behaved like a good husband in front of my eyes when he was secretly whispering sweet nothings to another woman outside the house. I bottled my feelings and walked to the dining table. The spread was all of my favorite things. Julian's face broke into a wide smile when he saw me. "Honey, you're back. Go wash your hands and be ready for your meal." I washed my hands and returned to sit across from Julian. He pulled a small box from his pocket and slid it my way. "Honey, this is for you, lottery winner. Just a few days ago was our wedding anniversary, but I couldn't escape the company." I looked up at him. So he knew it was also our anniversary. The present Julian gave me was a necklace, and was so beautiful and so dazzling. The box of the package was also very delicate. Otherwise, I would have been very happy if I hadn't seen the photo of the thing the stranger posted on their WeChat moments. The necklace this person wore was on the bottom right corner of the other person's photo. On the tray for holding jewelry were 3 words: "Free gift area." My husband gave another woman a gift for her to enjoy, and then gifted it to me for free. I cannot put into words how I feel right now. Should I rejoice that my philandering husband still held me close to his heart, or be outraged that he had the gall to try to palm me off with a freebie? For a long time I said nothing. Eventually, Julian realized that I was wrong with my mood. "Honey, what's wrong? Who made you unhappy?" Little more than a slightly closer spark falling into the center of explosives. At this moment, all of my anger flowed fully out. I got up and turned the table over. All the food was spilled on the ground and Julian was covered in grease. He seemed shocked. It was a long moment in silence, he gazing at me slack-jawed. Julian had shouted, "Evelyn, what are you going crazy for? Just because I did not spend the anniversary with you. Does it require flipping the table to smash the bowls? I have already said a nice thing to you and have given you a gift. What else do you want? We either work it out or we get divorced." I met his furious gaze and nodded with a smile. Then let's get divorced." Julian was stunned. He was not expecting me to utter the word divorce so easily. After all those years, I knew better than anyone how much I loved him too. "Crazy." Julian mumbled under his breath and turned to grab his phone and car keys, slamming the door behind him as he left. Julian didn't return that night. I wasn't sure how we had gotten here. We used to be so good. Julian and I were an all-American childhood couple. We grew up together. I believed we would be together forever. But during Julian's freshman year of high school, his father had an affair. Julian's mother caused a big commotion once she figured the truth out. The end result was the two ended up getting divorced. And Julian's mother changed schools with Julian. We ended up like this, torn apart. The next time we saw each other was after we graduated from university. We both applied to the same company. I was very happy to see him. And he was happy too. It felt like we were back in the good days of school. We both tacitly avoided asking each other what had happened in our lives in the last several years. I knew that Julian's wife took him with her shortly after his mother left, and Julian got a younger brother 17 years later. As children, Julian would say that his greatest joy was having an ideal family. But then the family he most cherished tore apart. This was during an interview where there was only him, me, and another guy left at the final round. That was a pretty amazing guy. But alas, his emotional intelligence struggled a bit, so he was eliminated. When it was only he and I left, he bowed out with some high-minded excuse. I cleared the final interview and here's the job offer. He then visited me for dinner and never declined. By the end of the meal, my questions spilled out. The opportunity gave to me why. He was stunned. Then his eyes became deep, like he was working something out in his head. Finally, he added, "It makes no sense. I thought your major was better fit to this job opportunity than mine." Since then, we were reacquainted. We had dinner together after work, played games together when we were free, and climbed mountains together on the weekends. We grew closer and closer to each other. I had assumed that he liked me just as much as I liked him. And that is when I confessed love to him. On that day, we were at the top of the mountain. The wind blowing toward us tousled the hair down his forehead, and I was dazzled by his smile. He took my confession and said, "Okay, then let's be together." We dated for a year before getting married until now. Back in those days, lying in the hospital bed. One by one, a masochistic ally swiped through that which at odd times of that account. There was the true answer to every moment of happiness which I thought was real. It turned out the day he offered me the job opportunity, he messaged her. "You told me I didn't know how to love, that I didn't know the volume of injustice girls in this world had to face. Today I offered a job to a girl. Is this what the gods will see and feel sorry for you? Ask better opportunities for you?" The day I told him, he sent a message to her. "You said I don't know how to love, that no one will love me. But someone today made a confession to me. Does it mean I made her actually feel my love? Now that I learned to love, will you come back?" He also sent her a message on the day we got married. "I'm getting married today, but you're not the bride. If it's not you, then whoever it is doesn't matter. I wish you could be there with me. I seriously want to see you in a wedding dress. How I wish we could stand on the stage together and accept all the blessings and applause from the audience. There's still a lot more." The whole entire 3 years of our marriage, never a moment passed when he didn't think about her. The marriage was a 3-year affair, a relationship of bubbles in the sun. They appeared colorful but vanish with a feathered touch. The next day, I arrived at my company and directly visited my leader. I came straight to the point. "Olivia, I'm open to riding with you." Olivia seemed stunned and replied, "Have you thought it through?" Olivia was an executive at the firm. Except that the boss was a person of scurrilous disposition and that all her professional accomplishments were foisted off on his girlfriend. After this happened one too many times, Olivia lost patience. She wanted to leave our firm with some key team members and go to a new first-tier city to set up herself. And I was one of them. While I did know that Olivia wanted the best for me and that the new business environment in the first-tier city would definitely exceed my expectations of development here, but I really didn't want to separate from Julie. So now it looks like men do affect how fast I can make money. I nodded emphatically. "Yeah. I'll go with you, sis. Weren't you kind of sad to leave your husband? What happened that makes you willing to go with me now?" I smiled bitterly. "Yeah. He has an influence on my money-making speed, so I am planning to divorce him." Olivia acclaimed at hearing the first half of the sentence agreement, but after hearing the second half she was amazed. Olivia was a smart person. She understood things were complicated. But she didn't ask further. "We will leave in 1 month, 1 month. Settle your affairs within this month." I smiled and nodded in agreement. "Oh, and you still haven't used annual leave. You may take it or request HR to cash it in. Complete the application form and take it to me for a signature. And when you return from your yearly leave, I will find an excuse to fire you. Fake it and you can win a separation payment." Upon hearing such a thing, my eyes swelled with great joy. I dashed up to Olivia and wrapped her in a bear hug. Indeed, frustrated in love, one can be lucky at work. But this joy was short-lived and shattered by a phone call. A man, representing himself as a lawyer, called me and told that he will follow up the car accident that I have had before. He was clear, telling her that his client would take whatever money was offered. I texted him my miscarriage diagnosis, my multiple medical bills, along with evidence of work loss expenses, food expenses, etc. The lawyer was shocked I was so prepared, to be honest. The day I found out in the hospital. Forget the divorce and all the drama of this incident. I had already prepared for this. Half an hour later, the lawyer responded that the compensation was acceptable and his client wanted a meeting. I told Olivia about this and waited for them at the coffee shop downstairs of our company. When a man and a woman took seats in front of me, I could easily see the face of the woman. She smiled at me, extended her hand and said, "Hi, I'm Ava." I do apologize that I did not inspect the vehicle before I drive it. I didn't know that there was anything wrong with the braking system. I'm so sorry to hear what you've been through. I will accept all of your conditions and compensation as long as they fall within reasonableness and legality, she said. She was sorry. But the way her eyes looked at me bore no trace of apology whatsoever. Straight instead, she seemed a little proud. I had to assume that she knew who I was too. A woman's intuition really is great and spot on. I smiled and took my hand and introduced myself, Evelyn. Then the lawyer sat down and began to babble, quoting a diversity of laws and regulations, very convincingly. Then he threw out a number 118. 0 yuan. I nodded in agreement with her. It was even a bit more than I had calculated. I believe that now a man can be replaced, but money is a necessity. I signed the letter of understanding and Ava sent the money to me in front of me. This matter was completely resolved. After the lawyer, she turned and faced me. Yo, Miss Evelyn, where you going? You need a ride? I declined. Thank you. My company is right nearby. Turning her head to the side, she smiled and said, wait a little, my boyfriend is on his way. Let him treat us to a meal. Don't you tell it what I saw, but as soon she ended talking, I could hear a voice. My dear. I'm here. Ava and I stood up simultaneously and turned toward the direction of the person coming. Julian's panicked expression shifted to a look of relief when he saw my face. I think by now he has to know the real story. In the evening after Julian returned, I was cooking in the kitchen. He just stared at me from the kitchen door in silence. I pretended he wasn't there until I had placed the last dish on the table, and then I looked at him. Let's eat. We can talk after the meal. Julian sipped tea in silence as he walked to the table, picked up his chopsticks but took a long time to eat. Honey, I'm sorry. From the beginning I cut him off without mercy. Julian still didn't move. He set down his chopsticks and simply stared at me silently. I ate as if no one sat across from me. After I was full, I looked at the man in front of me. Tut tut. I found myself clicking my tongue. You indeed had more than enough to eat outside, it looks. You have not eaten any of that food at your home. Hearing this, Julian turned, his face transformed. He reached for his chopsticks to greet, but I stopped him. Don't force it. If you can't eat, don't eat. No, honey, listen to me. She has nothing to do with me. If I was the one who gave him the divorce agreement before Julian, even before Julian could finish. Julian bit his tongue upon seeing divorce agreement. He stared at me incredulously and stammered, honey, you want to divorce me? I nodded. Yes, or else so that I continue to pretend to be blind and watch you to be romantic. I didn't. Honey. Believe me. I am now completely divorced from her. You can't just kill me based on your predictions. What made Julian feel so wrong that his face turned red, as if he had really encountered an unbearable condition. I sneered. Her thing, sure, nothing to do with her now. What about yesterday though? Or those days I followed you leading under the guise of a business trip you were on to go visit her and see the aurora. You know everything? Julian looked at me in shock. How would you know? Did she tell you? No way, she would never say that. Julian was still even trying to trick me now, as if whatever happened would be okay so long as I didn't know. For the first time I thought my taste in men was that bad. How could I fall in love with such a hypocritical dude? I was in the next door ward when you were with her in the ward. I was just finishing up your call when you called her darling and gently coaxed her not to cry. When you said that it was all my fault for not looking at the road, the anesthetic in my body had not yet worn off. I could barely even walk and get out of bed during those days when you were waiting for the aurora abroad with her. So tell me, what do you expect I stay married for? Stop talking. Julian sprang to his feet with his hands cupped over his ears, backpedaling. This can't be true. How could this happen? How could you be the person she had? Julian was unwilling to accept this fact. He looked a bit crazy. Honey, I was wrong. You know what else would be fun? I really know I was wrong. Let's not get divorced, sound good? Julian jumped in front of me and dropped to his knees, giving himself a slap as he spoke. Honey, if you are mad you can slap me or yell at me. But don't say the word divorce, okay? I can't live without you. I looked at the person on his knees on the ground and frowned, my heart not psychopathic jitter at all. I suddenly thought of the last time he was on his knees before me. That would be him on one knee and putting a ring on me at our wedding. I had indeed at that time, the blessings and applause of every man, lost in this blinding light, my own world. Had I missed the reluctant, disappointed look in his eyes? With this in mind, I lifted my foot and kicked him over. I got up and peered down at him. Julian, don't give me a reason to look down on you. He still had a sack sign where. We both have our own institutions to work with, so let's part friends and not make this too ugly. After saying that, I turned away and walked upstairs to my room. The next morning I woke up and went down the stairs. I was amazed to find that Julian had already made breakfast and had been waiting for me. When he saw me come downstairs, a fawning smile spread across his face. Darling, come down for breakfast. I sat at the dining table, rested my chin on my hands and stared at him. Julian, do you cook every time after making a mistake feeling guilty? Julian's body stiffened and he looked at me confused. I continued on my own. You never cook, not to my knowledge anyway. In 3 years of marriage I can count on one hand how many times you have been in the kitchen. Let me think. When was the first time? I think it was about 4 months ago. Ava must have come back. You smoothed her over with lies about working overtime so you could get 3 hours of her company, and the next day you made me breakfast. The second time was on my birthday previously. You came with me on my birthday but you were late. You were watching a movie with her. Right? And then the next day you cooked me a meal. The third time was. I unmasked him layer by layer, stripping off all his false identities. Julian stood there looking so embarrassed. Head lowered, not daring to look up at me. It is forever breakfast when. The previous time was when you returned home from abroad, when you cooked dinner. You must have fucking bastards slept together? Upon hearing this, Julianne hastily retorted. No, we slept separately. I had nothing on her, she says. Baby, you must trust me. Believe you? I said contemptuously. Given what you did, would you believe you if you were in my position? Julian was stuck for words. His lips parted but no words escaped. Clearly he regarded his words as having no credibility either. I grabbed the porridge beside me and dumped the cream on his head. You know what? Ever since I discovered the truth, this is how I see you, revolting and irritating. Having said that, I shoved him back and strode out. As I got to the door, I remembered something and turned around to say, I hope the signed divorce agreement is waiting for me when I get home from work tonight. If you don't want, I won't hesitate in suing for divorce. Once I got to company, I spent some minutes seeing to the task of the day before I applied for annual leave. The approval flew through in no time. And I grabbed my bag right there and left and walked into a nearby law firm. To my surprise, it was the lawyer Ava had previously hired who received me. This one was named Henry, perhaps in his mid-30s. When I explained that I was there to sue for divorce, he was taken aback. Henry asked why we divorced and I didn't stick to my guns. Miss Evelyn, do you mean to say that Miss Ava is the other woman? I nodded. What? Do you think she looks like one, or do you want to give her a heads up? Henry quickly shook his head. No, you've got this all wrong. I was just asking casually. Unless there are other questions, please get the materials ready for the Henry lawsuit. As I was about to leave after signing the contract, I got a message from Ava. Bitch, what did you do? Why is my brother Julian not talking with me? Did you touch brother Julian shit and unfriend and block me, bitch? Evelyn, I'm telling you, I don't care about your little tricks. The mistress is the one who is not loved. Just wait, brother Julian dad kick you out. Most of her messages were abusive messages. And then she sent a whole lot of things about her and Julian trying to break me down. I passed the phone to Henry and he was shocked when he looked at it. He surreptitiously removed his own phone and began documenting the evidence. I went to the mall after the law firm and bought some of the things that I would need later, and I also got a manicure and a full body spa. Where, based on what I knew of Julian, he would certainly hound me mercilessly. I needed to get my required amount of rest and strength for this strenuous battle. When I returned home, I learned that my parents and Julian's mom were all in attendance. The moment the 3 elders saw me, they rose simultaneously and truck in the direction of me. Julian's mother stepped forward and warmly took my hand and called me her beautiful daughter-in-law. My parents also smiled and exclaimed that I had been working hard at work and asked me to go sit down and resting soon. I shoved my way past the 3 of them and saw Julian on his knees on the ground, shirtless, a rattan thrust high in both hands. He had a blank expression, which sounds like very solemn, like a warrior fearless going to his death. I touched the corners of my mouth, curious to know what else he was up to. I glanced back at the 3 people behind me, and they all had perspective words on their faces that were never printed in ink. After a long stammer, my mother finally said, Evelyn, we know all about you and Julian. Julian asked us to come here today because he wants to ask you for your forgiveness in front of us. It is a guarantee of sorts too. Julian's mother nodded her head in agreement. Yes, you and Julian were literally raised together. It would be a shame to divorce after years of being together. Evelyn, if you are very angry, you can hit him. Just keep him alive. My father also had seldom played the peacemaker to console me. Evelyn, you're all grown-ups. You better rein that temper in a little bit. Julian has confessed to all concerning he and the woman. They are innocent and he promised that they are innocent. We've seen the chat records of him and that woman. There's really nothing. It's simply normal friend-to-friend dialogue. Julian also hit that woman in front of us. Samantha, don't make it hard on him. I was in shock as I stared blankly at the three of them. It was a woman who had been wronged by a man. And the other two were my father and mother. But now they were all on Julian's side, begging me to forgive him. Julian, as the guilty party, made a closing summary. Wait, I really know I was wrong. Never again a lot of interaction with other women, I swear. No hate for the haters though. You can also punch me until you feel better. He knelt down and the further he spoke is to get closer to me, handed me the rattan on his knees. I smirked a bit at the leash and then quickly took the rattan and snapped it onto Julian. Whoosh. There was rip of rattan in the air, then the sound of Julian screaming. I sneered. You're screaming so loud after a single shot. And if I smacked you until I was satisfied, as you say, you would be dead. Julian braced himself, hands down on the ground. His forehead glistened with pain, sweat, and a bright red line stretched across his entire back. He narrated through gritted teeth, "It's fine, I can deal with it. Honey, hit me." A few more strokes I gave him and beads of blood appeared on Julian's back and his face went pale. Julian's mother had a tortured expression on her face. She felt like she wanted to plead for him several times but wouldn't even dare to say anything. It appeared that Julian had prepared the three of them well ahead of time. Evelyn. You bitch, Ava appeared from out of nowhere. As soon as she saw me punching Julian, she ran over and shoved me away. So by now I would have probably fallen to the grass had my mom not been quick-witted enough to catch me. Ava flung herself beside Julian, sobbing and wailing like she had lost her father. Julian, I'll help you up. Let's go to the hospital. The next second, Julian shoved Ava, who sat next to him, away. Ava's eyes were glazed over, her lips quivering. Julian, what are you doing? I chuckled aside. Don't you see? He dragged my parents and his mother here as witnesses to beg me not to divorce. Let me hit him to vent my anger, in order to ask for forgiveness from me. Ava was shocked to hear me say this. Impossible. Ava shouted. Did you tell Julian you didn't love her and you only married her just to have Dale? What are you doing now? And when these words came out, the faces of the three parents immediately changed. I was calm as if nothing happened and quietly watching the show. Julian grimly lifted his head and gazed at me. Pal, don't pay attention to her bullshit. I didn't say those things. The person I love is you. Trust me, Ava knew everything by this point. She suddenly erupted with laughter, as if the woman before her was nothing like the woman now. Julian, are you performing the drama of a wayward son returning? Do you even deserve it? I nodded emphatically. That's right. Do you deserve it? Ava directed and screamed at Julian's mother. Do you think I seduced him? Let me show you the truth. Her phone came out as she spoke. She was about to show the proof. Julian panicked. His flying pounce overwhelmed Ava. Took her phone and threw it across the opposite wall. His phone dropped, shattered into pieces. This set of actions unfolded so quickly that before anyone could react, it was done. But the people in attendance were not fools. Julian's nervousness proved that he had been covering something. I smiled. It doesn't matter. I have evidence too. As I spoke, I pulled out my phone, opened Ava's Reach It Moments and handed it to the three parents. Take your time to look. We have plenty of time. He tried getting up but I stepped on him and pushed him down. Julian, I'm telling you out right now. This job is not owed to you because you decided to give it to me. I later confirmed this with the head of the interview at the company. He said the match degree of your professional matching degree is not high, and that the range of your in-school simulation experience was not comparable to mine. So quit being so self-righteous. And you mentioned that you learned to love others. Based on what's going on right now, your output is subpar at best. And you said that as long as it was not the bride, then it did not matter who it was. What are you fussing about now that I am proposing a divorce to make you fulfilled? I uncovered his whole false love to everyone. Julian's eyes widened. He looked at me like I was a ghost. Want to hear how I learned all that? I pointed at Ava beside me. Months ago, the night you said you were working late, I received a friend request from a stranger. And I accepted it. He posted all your stories on her WeChat moments. It was supposed to be visible only to me. I had been liking each post about your heartwarming romance. Ava nodded with a smile. That's right. I did it all. You said you didn't like her. You said you were tired of this average existence. You said that if not for her you would absolutely marry me. While she talked, Ava suddenly faced me. Do you know? Anyway, I once intentionally hit you with my car. He hinted to me to do it. Evelyn, you got into a car accident before? My mom gasped and rushed over to assess my well-being. I shook my head. I'm fine. I've recovered. You said you knocked down my daughter Evelyn with your car? My dad ran out in one quick motion, grabbed Ava by the hair and lifted her up. Ava winced before smiling and saying, yes, son-in-law was your well-wisher who suggested me to do it. And the compensation of more than 100,000 yuan I paid to your daughter was also paid by him on my behalf. Heard bitch, my dad raised his hand and slapped Ava. I rushed forward and dragged him back. Ava had bled from the slap on her mouth. But she kept laughing. It's now yes killing me. Julian told me to do it. Thus, the faces of the three who first came to speak on behalf of Julian altered. Did Julian just tell you that I need a divorce and I misunderstood him about having a woman outside and why deceive you? Come here? The three didn't deny it. Which indirectly implied I was correct. Mom, this may be the last time I call you this. I took Julian's mother's hand and said, I'm definitely divorcing Julian. But what I want to tell you is, you need to think about yourself. You've been on Julian's family men for the last few decades. But think about it. Julian is that man's blood and genes as the son of his father. What he did today you can't save. I said this to reassure Julian's mom, whom those two men in her life had betrayed. The man whom she remarried was gay. He lured her into getting pregnant, took the child away when she was 3 and divorced her. But from then on, all her time, all her energy went into Julian. Julian was the pride of her life. But the son who made her hated the most the betrayal. Hearing that, Julian's mother slapped Juliet Weiss and walked out weeping. Julian spent 2 weeks in the hospital before he recovered. He didn't agree to the divorce until after he was discharged from the hospital. After leaving the Civil Affairs Bureau, he looked at me and cried. He said, dead serious, I'm sorry. I waved my hand. No need. These words so false, so useless. If you really pity me, then you should be giving me more compensation. To my surprise, he nodded and went along with it. He promptly hired a lawyer to rewrite the agreement, changed 2/3 of the properties in his name to mine, and also agreed to transfer 1/4 of his salary monthly to me automatically. At the same time he sued Ava, requesting she return the more than 100,000 yuan. He transferred to me the money again once Ava returned the money to him, saying that this money is originally meant to be for my part. My heart told me to do so, and so I did with a clear conscience. I sold the wedding house we purchased together. In 2021 she sold the house and the proceeds were divided 70/30. Me 70, him 30. Regarding Ava, my parents meant for me to sue her, claiming she tried to murder me. They even got a lawyer on my behalf and discussed what to do in this scenario. The lawyer advised them that because I had signed a waiver and accepted the compensation, I was unable to sue. What mattered most, though, was that we had no evidence. As the witness heard Davis say that she hit me on purpose, that was still not enough to prove that the eyewitness heard her say that. What they used to may testify instead. My parents and mother-in-law could not be used, nor any surveillance back home. So this issue had to remain undetermined. My parents were so mad they wanted to go secretly find someone to beat Teva up. I immediately told them to stop and told them this is a law society, and there are surveillance cameras everywhere. They walked a tightrope. Once discovered, getting in trouble would be simple. It took a lot of convincing, but eventually I was able to talk my parents out of their revenge scheme. Once I calmed down my parents, I went to visit Julian's mother again. When she saw me, she immediately started crying, saying that she was sorry for me and as a mother how she didn't raise Julian right. That Julian was the person she hated the most was something his mother never quite could accept, of course. For a day I stayed with her and comforted her until she felt better. A little later I had some friends over and said a quiet goodbye when it was all over. It was time for me to leave. When Julian found out I was leaving, he came to see me overnight. And red-eyed he asked me, "Are you leaving this place? Is it because of me?" I just had to see him because of the large amount of money he gave me earlier. When he said this, I was left speechless. I rolled my eyes and replied peevishly, "You're overthinking this. You're not important in the slightest. I have better development opportunities, so I am leaving. He was momentarily stunned, then nodded, disappointed. Basically all he did was ramble on, asking me to be careful when I went to the new place, to be in a community with high privacy and security, to provide for myself and be nice. Lastly, if I should happen to find someone nice, he told me to inform him and he would definitely help me in judging. When he was done and turning to leave, I called out to him. He spun around and looked at me with glee, and said with excitement, "Evelyn, I knew you were going to say something to me too." I nodded and said, "I recommend you go to the hospital for a checkup when it's convenient. Red eyes could easily be a symptom of sickness. What if you become a zombie later and have to fight dogs for food?" That was what I said, and that is what I leave behind. Yes, after moving to the new city, I found the food and the situations quite new, and it was taking time for me to adjust. But I adjusted well even in a new environment. About 3 months later, you had to be a woman to tell me that Julian and Ava were getting married. I was momentarily stunned. After all the trouble they went through previously, they could still be together. They appeared to really be in love. "Are you okay?" my friend asked me cautiously. I replied to him, "I'm fine. What could be wrong with me?" It turns out, my friend told me later, that they were actually getting married because Ava was pregnant and she chased Julian to do the right thing. I thought about it carefully. If the child were conceived during the days they were abroad, it would be over 4 months old by now, and at this stage it would definitely begin to show. I thought it was a wonderfully fitting pairing of a scumdag and a slut, and I wished they could be locked in a room together till doomsday. Just as I thought it was all over, Julian approached me. "Evelyn, I'm getting married." "Oh, and then?" I replied indifferently, and then asked, "You didn't come here to ask your ex to come to your wedding, did you?" He shook his head. No, I'm here to tell you, February 25th, 2023, I don't love her. The person I love is you." I bared my teeth and stared at him as if he were an idiot. "Are you okay? Doesn't what you said sound familiar? You told Ava the same thing when you were married to me, didn't you, Julian?" I do ask, do you have some kind of serious obsession with your ex-lovers? The whole time you were with me, you thought about Ava every single day. Now that you're going to be married to Ava, you come here and you tell me you love me. If you're sick, go to the hospital. I want you to get out of my way and stop bothering me." Julian hung stunned for a moment and then smiled bitterly. "I'm so in love with you that I can extricate myself. I'm lovesick." I felt for a moment like my ears had become dirty. I didn't think Julian was still so annoying. "If you have nothing else to do, you can leave," I said futilely. "I will give you one piece of advice since you are going to marry her for the sake of our childhood. Make sure she and child stay healthy. After all, you've lost one child already." Julian's eyes went wide at this. He strode up to me, seized my shoulders, and growled, "What did you say?" "I've already lost one child." "What do you mean?" I freed myself from his grasp, stepped back 2 paces and gazed unhappily at him. I had just learned that I was more than 2 months pregnant. She ran me over with her car right after I left the hospital and I lost the child. I ended up in the hospital for nearly 2 weeks. After that, she asked me compensation and I gave her all the hospital expenses receipts. "Did you not see those receipts when you handed her cash?" Julian gazed vacantly, muttering the minor "my child" over and over again. After a moment he started to laugh. "I murdered my own child with my own hands. I really deserve it." I didn't know what was the matter with Julian, so I simply turned around and erupted in laughter. The friend who was at Julian's wedding later told me that on the wedding night, he beat Ava to make her have a miscarriage. Ava suffered a large bleed and nearly died. I heard that she asked him to shoot her, but he wouldn't answer, and finally she survived, but she was paralyzed and would never be able to leave her bed again. Then I learned that Ava had kept the receipt of my miscarriage and that I had lost the child from me. Julian knew about it, that he would be so heartless as to hurt the child for Ava's sake and keep quiet. Julian was also sentenced to 11 years prison on a charge of deliberate injury himself. Before he was incarcerated, he wrote me a letter and had a friend send it to me. The letter contained just 2 sentences. "Evelyn, I avenged our child. Evelyn, I'm sorry." I turned the letter into a ball and threw it expressionless into the trash can. My first reaction when I read the content of the letter was, this crazy man really knows how to excuse himself. I then watched the cleaning egg pick up everything in the trash can next to me. It was all stolen and trash all at once, just like my relationship has been over the past few years. I rotated my head away from the window. It was a great day for working people. The sun shined brightly. "Evelyn, come to a meeting." I heard Olivia's call and I stood up and said, "Okay, I will be right there." Then, on that particular day, 5 years and 6 months after my detention, Evelyn got married. I learned this news from a brother who still considered me a friend. So I was not surprised that Evelyn got remarried. She was so brilliant, and I'm sure there's loads of people who loved her. I was just curious who the guy she married was, if he was handsome, if he made money, if he treated her well. I had so many questions and I wanted to see this man with my own eyes. The very man who had won my sister over and made me jealous and hate-filled and so envious. The friend who visited me seemed to sense what was on my mind. He went out of his way to tell me about this man. The man was 3 years younger than Evelyn, a younger dude. But he was a very calm and refined man. He was the son of a director at one of their new company's partners. It was the man who pursues Evelyn brazenly. After almost 6 months of describing her, Evelyn finally said yes to him. After a little over a year of dating, the two decided to get married. But from what my friend described, I knew this guy was special. I was happy about this. But I also felt a little bit lost. At that time I had no way to convey my inner complexity. Like I had a treasure, apparently a treasure, not to mention it was mine, but I could not protect it properly. I could just watch it go and choose someone better who could defend it. I shared my silly thoughts with a friend. My friend looked surprised at me and asked me, "Why do I think like this?" He added that in his mind, Evan was never any kind of jewel of such said precious treasure. She was a smart and resourceful woman able to fend for herself and others. He shook his head sadly, and this was not something I had lived enough to recognize. "Launch, you seem never to have considered Evelyn your equal, and because of this when it came down to it, you lost her." When he finished, he bid farewell and walked out. He was also about to leave this city in search of his own happiness. I looked at him as he walked away. And a great panic swept through me. And this was the type of person I was. I was as honest about myself as I'd ever been, and it felt like I was being seen for the first time in my life, real and ugly. I remember my time as a kid with Evelyn and all the days we had after we reunited after we grew up. And then it finally turned to my present circumstance. In an instant, I grasped what Evelyn meant about bringing trouble on oneself. It had the feeling of saying that as long as she didn't find out, I could act recklessly, because nothing was real until it had to be dealt with. Or even if she knew. Since she loved me so much and apparently could not leave me, the consequences wouldn't be too bad. I miscalculated my own significance and hers regarding bottom line. I gently told her I am outside. I'll be back soon. That day I penned 2 letters. One was to my mother. I will be difficult in my heart because I have never been able to repay my mother in this life. The other was to Evelyn. Not knowing what to write, I just sent my last blessings. The cell, the bed, was inhabited by me, looking at a little strip of space above the window and finally closing my eyes. All I can say to her in this life is sorry. Perhaps in the next one, I love her with my whole life, with my full life.